The Mongol Empire is most famous for its destructive campaigns worldwide, and is often dismissed as an empire which only tore down but never built. What happened after the initial conquest receives less attention at large. However, the Mongol state proved surprisingly eager to rebuild and construct new cities in the Great Eurasian steppes. Today we look at the flash of steppe urbanization under the Mongol Empire. This video is made possible thanks to the generous support of our YouTube members and patrons. Their contributions are the backbone of our work. As a token of our appreciation, our patrons and YouTube members enjoy 2 exclusive videos every week. Currently, they have access to a complete series on Xenophon's Anabasis, the First Punic War, History of Prussia, Italian Unification Wars, Risorgimento, and numerous other fun videos. Additionally, our Pacific War series is ongoing, and we're excited to announce the release of a new series on the Russo-Japanese War and Albigensian Crusades, and much more, exclusively for our backers. If you want to join this fantastic community, you can find the links in the video description and pinned comment. By becoming a patron or YouTube member, you'll gain access to exclusive videos, early access to all our public content, release schedules, wallpapers, and an invitation to our active Discord server where we engage in lively discussions. Your support is invaluable, and we sincerely thank you for making our work possible. While it may seem contrary, cities and permanent or seasonally inhabited urban sites are attested at least as far back as the Xiongnu and Scythians. Often only having a sporadic mention in textual sources, many are only known archaeologically. Some were relatively small, with a few permanent structures or a palace surrounded by a set of square walls. Or, like the site called Qaraqorum 5 in Tuva, they were fortified production colonies for the steppe empires, full of smelters, charcoal pits, furnaces, and evidence of other types of production, exploiting local resources for the Khans. Others were quite large, such as the Uyghur capital of Ordu-Baliq or the Mongol capital of Qaraqorum, which held as many as 30,000 people at its height, and was surrounded by a network of smaller settlements and agriculture, though still reliant on hundreds of cartloads of supplies being ferried to it. Generally, they show the influence of Central Asian and Chinese city layouts and building designs, though they were not wedded to it. They were only temporary residences for the Khans and their courts, which travelled along a seasonal route of other palaces, hunting lodges, and cities. These were sites for extensive crafts production, the working of bone, leather, glass, ceramics, jewellery, and various types of metal. Qaraqorum supplied the rest of the Mongolian plateau with small iron billets, for example, which were worked into usable objects elsewhere. Usually, these larger cities are associated with periods of imperial unity, such as under the Xiongnu, Roran, Gokturks, Uyghur, and Mongols. The complexity of supplying these centers required organization and stability to protect them from other nomads, encourage merchants to travel there, and import additional supplies. Often, the nomads were a minority in them, with most inhabitants from Central Asia or China, farmers, craftsmen, or administrators to serve the needs of various Khans and Xiongnu over time. Nomadic states generally had little issue demanding an entire group of people be moved to suit their needs. In one famous example, the Mongols brought an entire troop of German miners captured in Hungary all the way back across Asia for them. After the 1206 declaration of the Mongol Empire, Chinggis Khan had some sort of quasi-capital established, or at least a suitable base camp for collecting tribute. This site is called in various sources Yeke-Auruk or Ik-Hord, meaning great camp or palace. It's associated with the archaeological site of Avaga in northern Mongolia, along the Kelen River near his place of birth. It shows continuous habitation from the late 12th century through to the 14th, with a significant palace structure at the heart of the complex, and evidence for both local crafts production and mass animal sacrifice. Evidently, after its initial administrative duties ceased, it remained a site of ceremonial importance, perhaps through its association with Chinggis Khan. Likely in 1219, while passing through the Orkhon Valley on his way to attack the Khwarezmian Empire, Chinggis Khan chose a site for a new capital. The Orkhon had practical advantages, an area of rich grassland, ready water access, and wood reserves in a more centralized location to suit the expanding empire better. The Orkhon Valley was also the center of the early Göktürk and Uyghur Khaganates. Only 24 kilometers north of the site, Chinggis Khan chose to lay the ruins of Ordu-Baliq, the Uyghur capital. From the account of the Persian chronicler Juvayni, we know the Mongols explored Ordu-Baliq's ruins, calling upon specialists from China to help them read inscriptions on the site to identify it. By situating their new capital in such a prestigious area, Chinggis demonstrated his state as the heir to the great nomad empires of the past. Construction of the city did not begin until after his death, and was overseen by his son and successor Ugadai. Fortunately, not only is the city well attested in medieval accounts, the city's site is known and well studied, and corroborates well with the textual descriptions. The heart of the city was a four-way intersection, surrounded by the densest settlement layers, consisting of shops, markets, craft centers for ceramics, jewelry and metal wares, as well as religious structures for Christians, Muslims, Taoists and Buddhists, and inns for travelers and merchants. Out from the center, the settlement layer grows thinner, likely filled with districts of nomad felt tents during its heyday. In the city's southwestern corner was a huge Buddhist temple called the Pavilion of the Rising Yuan. It took some 20 years to build and underwent several refurbishments. According to one inscription on the site dating to 1346, the final height of the temple was some 90 meters tall, though more modest heights have been suggested based on the foundations. All of this was enclosed in some 4 kilometers of walls. South of these walls lay the palace for the Great Khan, known as the Kashi, Palace to the Mongols, and given a Chinese name, Wanangong, the Palace of Eternal Peace. The Kashi of Qaraqorum consisted of a central hall flanked by 2 wings. The main hall was the court and throne room of the Great Khan, where he held office during the 2 visits he paid to the city each year. The court of the Khan mirrored that of the nomad's ger, or felt tent. The Khan sat at the highest point at the north end of the hall, facing south, with his wives and daughters sitting on his left-hand side, and male family members to the right. The most famous feature of the Qaraqorum Great Hall was a silver tree constructed for Mongol Khan in the 1250s by a Parisian goldsmith captured during the European campaign. The tree dominated the center of the hall, and from gilded snakes in its branches poured various types of wines and alcohols from across the world, while lions at its base poured aireg or kumis, fermented mare's milk, the favored drink of the nomads. Qaraqorum was the largest city in 13th century Mongolia, but not the only one. A range of cities, palaces and outposts are identified through either textual sources or archaeology. Sources like those of Juvayni, Rashid al-Din and the Yuan Shi recorded how Khans like Ugadai ordered Chinese and Islamic builders to construct a string of palaces and lodges for himself, his family and mobile court that he spent the year traveling between. These palaces would then be surrounded by a town of felt tents and other impermanent structures to house not only the followers who accompanied the Khan's court, but merchants and others who sought to take advantage of the Khan's generosity. We see this carried out across the lands of the Mongol Empire. While the rest of the nomadic population migrated between seasonal pastures, the Khans and princes lived in a series of royal palaces and more permanent encampments, sometimes a part of larger cities or on their own. The most steppe city building was not in Mongolia proper, but in the lands of the Golden Horde. While there are sporadic textual and archaeological indications of towns and permanent settlements in the western steppes, none compared to the Golden Hordes. Enforced by the Khan's horsemen, the western steppes experienced a period of peace and stability after the Mongol conquest, unknown since the Khazars. The population was divided amongst the Horde princes, with lands and peoples allotted to each member of the descendants of Jochi, the Horde's ruling Chinggisid branch. Now secure from raiding, this promoted the movement of envoys, merchants, and ferrying of materials and supplies. The Khans also forced migrations of people to help repopulate the area. Batu Khan, for example, ordered Islamic, Hungarian, Turkic, Alan and Rus peoples to serve as labor in farms and production centers, servants in Mongol courts, and to permanently man ferry crossings over great rivers to support travel. in addition to overpaying for merchants' wares and building caravanserais. The combined effect meant that the steppe could serve as a functional highway of sorts along the so-called Silk Roads, as a number of Franciscan and Arab sources attest. The Khan of the Golden Horde made seasonal trips between summer and winter pastures along the Volga River, accompanied by his vast mobile court, made up of his wives, extended family, nobility, guards, administration, servants, hangers-on, as well as herds of animals. Batu had some 3,000 mares in proximity to his court to provide him with daily quantities of karakumis. Regularly stopping at designated locations, these stops likely featured palaces or other structures to help service the Khan's needs. Whenever they stopped, communities of merchants likely arrived to sell their services, or craftsmen, by choice or force, produced day-to-day goods for the court. These communities grew, fostered by the Khans. The first of them are mentioned in the sources of the mid-13th century. By the start of the 14th century, they became an urban network. Industries grew to support them, either by importing the materials needed for manufacturing, to feeding the employees, or housing the merchants who transported it. A wetter climate in the early 14th century, coupled with the careful control the horde kept of land allowances, made for wider cultivation of farmland in the steppes to feed growing settlements. Wheat, millet, barley, and other grains are attested in sources or archaeologically, while the Khans showed no hesitation forcing migrations to provide a labor force. Their spiritual and entertainment needs had to be met, requiring the construction of mosques and other places of worship, marketplaces, bathhouses, manors for the elite, and more, giving work to builders, brickmakers, and stonemasons. As its cities grew, so did its ability to manufacture goods for trade. The famous traveller Ibn Battuta vividly describes immense cities from his trip to the Golden Horde in the 1330s, corroborated by accounts of Franciscans, Italian merchants, and Mamluk embassies. They testify to the great wealth and power of the Horde, a rich member of international trade. From imports from Europe, the Mediterranean, Central Asia, or China, particularly silks, to exports such as grains, horses, glass, beads, pottery, Siberian furs, honeys, horses, and slaves, which traveled to the Rus, Ilkhanate, and India, or through the Crimean Peninsula to Italy, the Byzantine Empire, and Mamluk Egypt. Coins from Italy to the Delhi Sultanate found in the sites of the Golden Horde cities further attest to this. By the reign of Khan Uz-Bey in the first half of the 14th century, a conglomeration of cities, primarily along the lower Volga, had developed, and secondarily on the Don and Ural rivers. At least 110 archaeological settlements of varying sizes are dated to the Horde's core territories, and 30 more are known by name from textual sources and not found, with more to be discovered. While this period saw a revival of some previously devastated cities like Bulkar, most sites in the steppes were not based on existing settlements, but wholly new creations. Unlike in Mongolia, they were not built on Chinese models. Golden Horde cities instead showcase an approach to city planning influenced but not restricted to that seen in Seljuk Anatolia, the Caucasus, Iran, and Khwarezm. It suggests the origin of many of the laborers, engineers, and architects. A few features of these cities can be described. Before the 1360s, they were built without fortifications. Usually a major square, or set of squares, was surrounded by large mosques, madrasas, public baths, and manor homes. From these radiated out wide streets, out into districts, spaced with orchards, gardens, and farms. Since the cities were unwalled, they could stretch out deep into the steppe. The Seletreno site follows the Aktuba River for 7 kilometers, and then into the steppe for 2 kilometers. There were districts of Kipchaks, Rus, Alans, Armenians, and more. Ibn Battuta saw there Greeks, Spanish Jews, and Indians. Building materials depended on local resources. In the steppe, where stone and wood were less common, fired brick was the primary material, whereas stone was used in Bulgar and in Crimean sites. There were also districts for crafts production. Most wares were produced on site rather than imported. There are also remains of irrigation systems and underground pipes to supply water to cisterns, wells, and individual homes. At the same time, the public baths and some houses had their own internal heating system. Some archaeological sites are associated, based on their location and description, by name with cities in the sources, though it can be tricky. This is best exemplified by debates over the Golden Horde's capital, or rather capitals. On Golden Horde coinage, they are known as Sarai and New Sarai, the latter established by Ozbey in the 14th century. Often unhelpfully, medieval sources don't specify which Sarai they are referring to. New Sarai appears to have been the larger, and is likely to be associated with the largest urban site so far discovered that is associated with the Golden Horde period, the Seletreno site. It occupies an area of approximately 15 kilometers squared, of which some 30,000 meters squared have been excavated. The largest structure on the site is over 32 meters long by 40 meters wide, with 60 columns having once supported the roof. Made of fired brick and timber, with tiled floors and gilded polychromatic mosaics along the walls, it had previously been identified as a royal palace for the Khan, but is now thought to be a prayer hall for a huge mosque. The Golden Horde cities reached their height in the first half of the 14th century, during the reigns of Ozbey and his son Janibey. Their growth was stimulated by the peace and overland trade encouraged with the other Mongol Khanates, and extending to the corners of the world outside the empire. Crucially, the steppes had a relatively warm, wet period around this time, promoting grass production to support larger herds, crops, and therefore populations. Much of the Golden Horde's population was likely involved in a mix of pastoralism, agriculture, and urban life, depending on season and work availability. An extensive system was necessary to feed these cities. The population of the Seletreno site was, by some estimates, 75,000 people. This system struggled in the 1340s with the Black Death and an extended trade dispute with Venice and Genoa, resulting in an Italian blockade of the Horde's Crimean ports for several years, as well as the breakups of the other Mongol Khanates, which began to unravel the international trade system it relied upon. At the same time, shifts in the climate in the Horde's territory contributed to drier conditions in the steppes and a rising of the Caspian Sea, resulting in flooding in the lower reaches of the Volga. Over the 1360s through to the 1380s, the Horde was racked by civil wars. From the 1360s onwards, fortifications became standard features of Horde settlements. Travel became too dangerous in the steppes, even for Rus princes and their entourages coming to pay homage to the Khan, let alone for merchants. In what is often considered a sort of coup de grace, in the 1390s, the great Central Asian warlord Timur, or Tamerlane, invaded the Horde and sacked most of its major cities. This event is easily dated in many of them, for many ceased to be inhabited after this, with a thick layer of destruction and unburied bodies marking 1395 rather clearly. It wasn't the total end of these steppe cities. Many continued, at a somewhat lesser scale, for the next few centuries, and new ones were even founded, such as at Kazan and Astrakhan, which became capitals of their own khanates that were conquered by Ivan the Terrible in the 16th century. More videos on Mongol history are on the way, so make sure to subscribe and press the bell button to see them. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Recently we've started releasing weekly Patreon and YouTube member exclusive videos. Join the ranks of patrons and YouTube members via the link in the description or by pressing the button under the video to watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, join our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.